Binarism is the idea of two opposites, such as night and day or computers running on zeros and ones. Qualities such as adult or child, male or female, alive or dead are all examples of binary data that were encoded in the Khipus. Another binary Andean feature is moiety. When a social group is divided into two parts, in anthropology they call each part a moiety. In Andean society, the upper moiety is called Hanan Saya, and the lower moiety is called Hurin or Hurin Saya. I briefly introduced these in a previous video. This is a way that villagers are divided into two halves, usually based on family groups and called ayus, and the male lineage. So the sons born into a Hanan family will stay Hanan, along with carrying the family name. For women, they are born into one but can marry into the other. This isn't a class difference like upper and lower class, but can be a separation like one might be associated with farmers and the other with herders. With binary properties, markedness is an important feature in the Khipus. When there's a binary option, the more common variation will go unmarked, and the less common or less important feature will be marked. Let's see how this works with ply. When making a chord, fibers are twisted together. This can be done in two ways: an S twist or a Z. The letters don't stand for anything. Ply is called S or Z for the shape of the letter. But it gets a little more complicated. Some chords have a Z spin, or the original twist of the chord, and S ply when two chords are twisted together. Chords can be plied many times, so recording a precise twist can be difficult. Most Khipu observations only record the final twist for a chord, which is how they'll be discussed in this video series. Just be aware that there can be multiple layers of ply. Most Khipus have all S-ply dependents. A small number have all Z-ply dependents, and there are some that have a mix. In Khipus that are all one or the other, ply may not hold meaning, but simply be a preference of the person making the chords. However, when chords are plied differently in the same Khipu, this seems to be intentional. Like you can see patterns there. In a set of 59 Khipus, Marcia Ascher observed that when the primary chord has a different twist than all of its pendant chords, the Khipus are clearly numerical and neatly structured.
This image is of an ethnographic herding Khipu from Cutusuma, Bolivia, from the article Ply, Markedness, and Redundancy, New Evidence of How Andean Khipus Encoded Information by Sabine Hyland. There's a link in the description. In this Khipu, a herder recorded information about his sheep and cows. For the sheep, chords containing the number of females were S-plied, while chords representing the male sheep were Z-plied. The herder only recorded female cattle, using S-ply for the cows, still producing milk, and Z-ply for the dry cows. This is a good example of markedness. The most common or valued type is left unmarked, in this case S-ply, while the uncommon or less valued type is marked Z-ply. In this Khipu, the male sheep and dry cows are less valuable in herding and therefore marked. Just like twist, knots have S and Z direction. This image is from the Khipu, What Do the Knots Say, by Bruce Kelly. In Mangas, Peru, about 6 hours north of Lima, there is a flat wooden board with a list of names written in Spanish on both sides, and holes next to the names with a bit of cord threaded through. This type of object is sometimes called a Khipu artifact. It has chords like a Khipu, but it's not the typical primary chord with pendants. The chords still function like pendants. This image is from the article Khipus, Khipu Boards, and Sacred Text Toward a Philology of Andean Knotted Chords by Sabine Hyland, Sarah Bennison, and William P. Hyland. There's a link in the description. And if you want to get a closer look at this artifact, there is a Google Arts and Culture page about it. That's pretty cool. The Mangas Khipu board was used in the 1800s to ensure church members were complying with their religious obligations. There are accounts saying that the cords would hang loose and then be pulled through tight to the board as obligations were fulfilled. At the end of a set amount of time, there would be punishments for the people whose cords were still loose. To get ready for the next cycle, the board was turned over, new names were written, and the cords were replaced. The Ayus, family groups, were divided into the typical Hanan and Hurin groupings. Some of the names on the board could be associated with one of two known Ayus, Kotosh and Ayokai. The Kotosh group of families belonged to Hanan and were primarily farmers, while the Ayokai belonged to Hurin and were primarily herders. Due to deterioration over time, not all the names on the board were legible. Researchers were able to match 15 active chords to Kotosh and Ayokai names written on the board. Kotosh names had S knots on their respective chords, and the Ayokai names had Z knots. In this board, S and Z direction in the knots appears to be used to distinguish between marked and unmarked groups.
In the Tupikocha Khipus, the people interviewed about knot direction said that it wasn't meaningful, but rather a matter of personal preferences. Remembering that Khipus were used during the Wadi Empire, which lasted about 400 years, and 400 years after they were used by the Inca Empire for about 130 years, and have been in use since the colonial era, which started in 1532. Also, they were used in multiple regions and had various uses. It's quite possible that certain features were important in some sets of quipus and not at all important in other sets, especially with binary features like ply and knot direction, where you're forced to choose one or the other when making the chord.
Another way to show markedness in a quipu is by attachment, whether it be recto or verso. Recto is shown in the red chord on the left, where you put the pendant behind the primary chord when attaching it. Verso is shown in the yellow chord on the right, where you put the pendant in front of the primary chord. Be aware that recto and verso are reversed if the quipu is turned around, so without knowing which end is the beginning, it is impossible to know whether a pendant is actually recto or verso. But in quipus that have recto and verso pendants, you can look for patterns.
My workbook, for which there's a link in the description below, shows the quipus discussed previously in the context of ply attachment and knot direction, inviting the reader to develop their own theories about markedness in quipus. So please check that out if you want to go deeper in this topic. I also plan on looking at these features in the context of all of the quipus currently in the Open Quipu repository, in a future set of videos. So please leave any comments about questions that you want to explore. I hope you enjoy your studies. Bye.